Why does slowing down feel more frightening than staying exhausted? If stopping feels unsafe right now, stay. This may already be your story. In returning and rest, you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30-15. There are seasons when stillness feels like exposure, when the idea of stopping feels like removing the last layer of armor you have left. You keep moving not because you have strength, but because motion feels safer than rest. You don't rest, you pace. You don't pause, you distract. You don't become quiet. You fill the space with tasks, noise, planning, scrolling, anything that keeps you from hearing what might surface. Because when everything finally slows, you hear it. The fatigue you've been outrunning, the disappointment you've been managing, the questions you postponed because you didn't have the margin to face them honestly. So you stay busy, you stay alert, you stay just ahead of silence. Not because you want to, but because stillness feels like it might undo you. Isaiah speaks to people who lived inside that tension. They weren't openly rebellious. They were quietly resistant. God offered rest, and they hesitated. Not because they doubted him, but because rest felt unsafe. In returning and rest, you shall be saved. Returning doesn't mean going backward. It means turning back toward dependence, toward honesty, toward the place where you stopped pretending you could carry everything alone. Rest doesn't mean quitting responsibility. It means releasing the illusion that responsibility makes you invincible. You learned how to survive without stopping, how to cope without resting, how to function while carrying weight that was never meant to be permanent, and now rest threatens that system. Because rest requires you to feel what you've been suppressing. It requires you to acknowledge how tired you really are, and acknowledging that feels dangerous when you've been the one holding everything together. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. Quietness doesn't feel strong when you're worn down. It feels exposed. It feels like lowering your guard in a world that never stops swinging. Trust feels passive when you've been carrying everything yourself. It feels like surrendering leverage, like loosening your grip when you're afraid everything might fall apart. So you resist. You tell yourself you'll rest later. When things calm down, when the pressure lifts, when you feel safer. But Isaiah says strength doesn't come after quiet. It comes through it. The strength you're waiting for is not waiting for you at the finish line. It's waiting for you inside the pause you keep avoiding. This runs against everything you've been trained to believe. We live in a culture that worships motion. We praise speed. We admire endurance. We reward those who can keep going when others slow down. So, when God invites stillness, it sounds irresponsible, almost reckless, disconnected from reality. But God is not asking you to abandon responsibility. He's asking you to stop confusing motion with strength. Strength is not how long you can keep going. Strength is how well you can remain present without fleeing yourself. Stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something deeper is happening. When movement stops, truth surfaces. Thoughts you drowned out with productivity rise again. Emotions you postponed with obligation ask to be felt. That can feel overwhelming. But God does not expose you to harm you. He exposes in order to heal. You are not afraid of silence because it is empty. You are afraid because it is honest. It shows you how depleted you really are, how thin your patience has become, how much of your life has been lived in reaction rather than intention. That honesty threatens the version of you that keeps everything together, the version that never slows, the version that never needs help. But God is not attached to that version. He's attached to you. So he does not shout over your noise. He waits beneath it. America is living inside this resistance to stillness. Exhausted, but terrified of stopping. Burned out, but uneasy with rest. Overstimulated, but uncomfortable with silence. We live in constant reaction. Headlines, deadlines, notifications that never let your nervous system stand down. Silence feels like falling behind, like losing relevance, like wasting time. But Isaiah says salvation comes through returning, not racing. Returning to what? To dependence, to honesty, to a pace slow enough for trust to breathe. Trust cannot survive in constant acceleration. It needs space, it needs margin, it needs quiet. And quiet feels threatening when you've learned to equate worth with output. So maybe the reason rest feels impossible is not because you don't need it, but because you need it more than you're willing to admit. God's invitation is not dramatic. It does not arrive with force. It does not demand immediate obedience. It waits. Return. Rest. Be quiet. Not forever. Not irresponsibly. Just long enough to remember you are not holding everything together by yourself. You don't have to solve your life in stillness. You don't have to fix your emotions. You don't have to know what comes next. You only have to stop running long enough to be held. Quietness is not withdrawal from reality. It is return to truth. Trust is not blind optimism. It is choosing to lean when standing alone has become unbearable. And strength, real strength, is born there. Not in adrenaline, not in urgency, not in proving you can keep going. But in the moment you finally stop and say, I can't carry this the way I have been. That admission is not failure. It is the doorway. So if slowing down feels frightening, if rest feels undeserved, if stillness feels like exposure, you are closer to strength than you think. Return, rest, be quiet. Not because everything is safe, but because He is. For now, that is enough. Amen.